me to. Sort of like, yeah, last time I saw you was by the pool. It was by the pool in Woodside, I think, right? Wasn't that
It
our
was.
last? Yeah, yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Boy,
A lot
god
and
damn.
lots has happened since then. So,
Uh,
um, so,
yeah,
so, so I'll just
yeah.
kick it off with it's Lee Kelson coming to you live from our Fire Tech Connect studio here on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia, and I am joined by entrepreneur extraordinaire, venture capital, a mentor, advisor, and I think it's fair to say Silicon Valley veteran, Bill Reichert.
Right.
That's it. You got the grey hair to prove it too.
Exactly. Right. Actually, right. I'm actually only 38, but this is what working with Guy Kawasaki has done to me, right?
I actually talked to Guy the other day.
Just the other day. Yeah, I know you guys. I know you guys also have a connection. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, thank you, Lee. Great to be back in touch. Would be so much nicer if we were by the pool somewhere rather than digitally isolated here. But
That's right.
get through
And
this.
and
I'm
it
sure.
and
Yeah.
it was by the pool at the
Women's
the
Startup Lab.
Women's Startup Lab. Yeah. So I mean, that's a fantastic initiative. I'm a big supporter and been following those guys ever since then. That was a couple of years ago now. So how are they traveling? Are they, they've gone virtual or?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's had to, everybody like that. Every accelerator, every event organizer, every, startup grind, whatever, IBM Global, Summit. Everybody's gone virtual,
Yeah.
and it's been not bad actually. I mean, I think people there really is a yearning to interact with other human beings in a real sense, in a person-to-person sense. But I'll tell you, I mean, I've been on Zoom like 8 in the morning till 8 at night almost every day. I mean, interacting with people all over the planet.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I mean, I've been asking my friends what their feeling is about their level of productivity. At some level, I feel as though I am much more productive. The irony is I can schedule 11 meetings a day. I mean, and right, I don't have to travel from Silicon Valley up to the city or back down to San Jose or go to lunch. You can't go to lunch for less than an hour and a half, right? And so, all you need is about 30 seconds between meetings. This is actually in some ways the world that we said was going to happen back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
When we had broadband internet. Yay, right?
Right.
You remember
Right.
when people, the word broadband was like this, amazing new thing that we were going to have that was going to enable us to actually do video over the internet.
Yeah.
And we had video over the internet in the late 90s. It was a little bit, but any day now we were going to have just this great telepresence, right? And we would have the experience of as if we were in the same room together, and we would eliminate all this travel, and we would be so much more productive and efficient. And that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we're being forced into it, and we realize that it is not terrible, but it certainly ain't great. So
No, and there's this thing that people I've read, I think in Scientific American the other day, they're talking about Zoom fatigue. And I was joking with one of my colleagues and he said, this is going to be the new call, have a sickie day because you've got Zoom fatigue. And I said, man, I've been on Zoom from sort of 7 in the morning till 6 at night. And I'm telling you, I find it fatiguing.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, it's harder. it's harder to be casual and joke and relax. I think you have to be much more tightly focused, and you have to pay more attention. I don't know. It's interesting. I wonder. I mean, I don't think it's I don't think it's the screen per se. I think it's just the experience of, am I really hearing what he's saying? What did I miss? I'm looking at these tiny spreadsheets on the screen that they're sharing. I mean, it is really interesting. It is really interesting when you're in a Zoom meeting and you see the guys, they're kind of going like, and you go, whoa, too much information. I don't really need that.
I love
the camera, buddy. Right?
Or somebody's got their phone down on the desk and I'm looking straight up their nostrils and I'm going.
So
yeah, it's strange times. So, I mean, we were talking just off air before about, the different responses, and, your and my mutual friend, Chris Burry, is, on his Facebook feed, I see, I can see he's exasperated and frustrated with the US response. It's amazing, every morning, from around 6 o'clock, we get the CNN feed, and, I follow on my news feeds and see what's going on. And I saw, my head nearly exploded. I saw Jared Kushner come out and doing a victory lap.
Really? Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, this, the Trump family sort of debacle is, hopefully we'll look back on it and sort of, I don't know, laugh. We hope that will be sooner rather than later, that we'll get out of this. It's, I mean, it is, boy, there was some period of time, during the Trump era when my attitude was, it's embarrassing, it's upsetting, it actually is causing some real damage. But for the most part, most of our lives, did not depend upon, those guys, right? And what's just distressing and upsetting is the degree to which now our lives do depend upon what they do. I mean, almost literally. And it's just for California in particular, for Silicon Valley in particular, it is just such a head spinning transition from, the traditional Silicon Valley frame of reference was, Washington, DC, get out of our way. We don't need you. We don't want you. Just stay out of our way. You're nothing but a hindrance to us.
Yeah.
And now, we have this very weird dependency on, these people that we don't have a lot of faith or trust in. And it's, we're creating this massive structural dislocation that nobody knows how we're going to get out of this in terms of the economic aspect of it. I think, because we're so focused on the biological, infectious aspect of it, which, is important. Obviously, it's very important. But the macroeconomic impact, and then and the microeconomic. I mean, the economic impact of this is just unimaginable. I mean, we're going to be printing, the various central banks, we're going to print at least 10, $15 trillion before this is over. I mean, and so what does that do? What does it do? I mean, I haven't heard anybody tell me anything clearer about how this is going to sort out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
we'll see. I mean,
interestingly, this morning I saw protests with people with semi-automatic rifles in Michigan protesting.
well, so I have to admit, the other thing that's happened is I just can't pay attention to the news. I mean,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, oh, you just, if you pay attention to the news, you won't get anything done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is, I got to admit, I mean, it's understandable. I mean, at some level, whether or not I agree, obviously people are enormously frustrated, and the damage that's being done to lots and lots of people is just enormous. And it was, I mean, the global financial crisis was incredibly scary. I mean, because we thought maybe the global financial system would collapse. I mean, that was really frightening, but
Yeah.
it didn't. It didn't. It caused a very significant recession, but even though it was a significant recession, the structural dislocation was nothing compared to what we're looking at. I mean, it's just to have, we've now got well over 30 million people out of work. We got more people out of work than are in the entire population in Australia. We can send them all to Australia. What do you think? I mean,
Well,
there's an idea. I mean, hey, it worked. It worked before, right?
as long as they don't bring.
That's how you guys got started, sort of, right?
As long as they don't bring their semi-automatic weapons with them.
I mean, just the 21st century version of the criminals that started the country.
That's true. That's true. That we could. I think it was
terrible. I do apologize to all my dear Australian friends. I know.
No, we've been living with that joke for a long time. So,
I know. But so,
But
we gotta.
I think. With all of that aside, there is part of it that out of these crises we have the ability to innovate, and I've seen some amazing innovation come out of this, and I've been advising a number of early stage companies like you. I know you tend to spend a fair bit of your time advising and mentoring. I mean, what's your take on that in terms of, I suppose I see the two lenses, it's the Who Moved My Cheese book that I often reference. It's some people are sitting there saying, once we're just going to bunker down and wait until it gets back to normal. And then others are coming out and saying, we've got to change. We've got to move online. To your point, I was in New York in 99, 2000. We were talking about the convergence of digital and broadband, and e-commerce was going to take over the world. Now, we have seen over the last 20 years e-commerce grow, and we have seen video conferencing grow, and we have seen e-learning grow. But this is exponential growth in a short period of time. We're going to look back at this and go, wow, what happened there in the chart, right?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. How much will we revert back to where we were before at the end of this? Certainly we will revert substantially, but not all the way. I mean, I do think we will have learned to do more video conferencing. We will have gotten more proficient at it, more comfortable with it, and we will realize much more the virtues of, having pretty good connection without having to travel and spend a lot of time, physically getting together. So I think there'll be a lot of that comes together. We were talking the other day about education, and some guru of some sort was convinced that this is going to dramatically transform education. And someone else sort of laughed and said, I got to tell you, as soon as we can get our kids back in school, we're getting them back in school. we are not letting them stick around here, you know. I mean, and
So,
I mean, because
so I mean, talking about e-learning and education, I mean, you're a pioneer in that space, really, back in
thank
the
you
day,
for remembering. Yes, exactly.
right?
Right. I
So,
know.
so
I mean, it's been unbelievably frustrating how little impact the computer and the internet have had on our educational system. Now, the impact that it's had actually is not entirely, I mean, it was predicted, but it wasn't what we were focused on. We were focused on improving our own societies and the effectiveness of education, and then developing all new skills in our own society. The biggest impact the internet has had on education has been to make it available in developing countries where it wasn't available otherwise. And one of the great things about sort of the internet in terms of education and development has been that it has increased the degree to which English has become the lingua franca of global business.
right.
And so, for our state, I don't know how many foreign languages you speak, but I spent 7 years studying Latin, and that did not help much. So,
I did a bit of Swedish.
okay. So, yeah, I mean, and so for those of us who were, who grew up speaking English, we have the great advantage of the fact that we have managed to force pretty much everybody else on the planet to learn to speak English if they want to do business cross-border.
Yeah.
Now, it'll be interesting to see, what happens with China. That's a whole other discussion. But it is surprising, as someone who spent a big chunk of my career in educational technology, how little of a dent we've been able to make in all of the traditional structures beyond what we generally experience of the convenience of having Google and Wikipedia and word processing. But beyond that, I mean, it hasn't.
So it's this idea of this sort of, the sandstone building and the campus and bringing everybody in together. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying about, the potential for these trillions of dollars of stranded assets. The sort of riffing on the idea that we've built all of these subway systems and freeway systems to get people into centralized working, and now everybody's sort of dispersed into the regions. And are we going to see regional booms? Are we going to see that all of a sudden, how does a company that has had a commercial lease on their P&L, and all of a sudden, they don't have that, or their people are working from home and they're seeing that productivity actually isn't too bad. It hasn't been majorly affected. It's a good question. Why is that with these things, it's sort of the learning and the remote working, we've seen steady progress, but we've now seen an explosion, and it's the idea that we're either just going to go back to normal, or we're actually going to, is it going to change? It's crystal balling, I know, but
no, I think the core will remain. So here's my crystal ball, right? Okay,
yeah.
Understand. But based upon having been a futurist since I was a kid, right? So since I was a kid, I was, extremely enamored of the pace of technological progress. And that's actually, what I studied as an undergraduate at Harvard. I was a history and science major, and loved sort of looking at the evolution of science, technology, and society. And any student of technology and history has this sort of dual understanding of the pace of progress, which is that from a certain perspective, it feels as though technology progress is accelerating. We see new technologies, we look at the smartphone and we think, wow, that was fast. But at a sort of more fundamental level, if you look at it on a year by year by year basis, you think about it, this was arguably, depending on how you want to look at it, the internet was invented in 69, the cell phone was invented in 72. It's taken a long time for us to get to this.
Yeah.
It wasn't that fast in terms of what it took to get here from there. And so, again, as we were saying, we thought the internet was going to transform the structure of society, but there's something that keeps things the way they were, and it has to do with the way people interact with each other. And no matter what, people are going to prefer to get together if they can create that excuse. So I think the core will stay roughly the same. We will still have corporations bring people together into a building to work together to get things done, even if it is just knowledge work, which, theoretically knowledge work, you don't have to be in the same place, right?
Yeah.
In the old days, factory, you kind of had to be in the same place, but knowledge work, why bother? But yet we still bring people together. At the periphery, though, at the edge, what we have already seen, we'll see accelerated, which is, but now with these technologies and with this comfort, we'll be able to see many, many more virtual connections and distributed organizations. And we'll be able to see at the edge, the people who I can't spend 4 years on a campus going to college, I can't afford it or for whatever reason. So Harvard and Stanford and Oxford and Cambridge will stay the same. They'll stay the same. So people will show up and they'll live in the dorms there and they'll have that experience. But community colleges, the edge of education, and then, in developing countries, you'll see much more distributed thanks to these technologies. And I think experience will accelerate that tendency. But it won't be it's not like it's going to be this sudden discontinuity that, we all went from being in the same building to all being working at home, boom, all of a sudden. I think, we went to working at home, and then for the most part, we'll go back to the same building, but not entirely. There'll be a gap. Yeah. I think. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I think the idea that all of a sudden everybody's just going to be working from home, and that's the way that the new norm. I keep saying here, this is the new normal. There's, it's new, but there's nothing normal about it.
Exactly. All right. I know. It's crazy. But we will see, right, to your original point about in a crisis, there is innovation. If you're an entrepreneur in this environment, what do you do, right? So the thing, so we've been spending a lot of time over the last, several weeks talking to entrepreneurs, our portfolio companies and the companies that we have been engaged with about possible investing. Everybody has had to have a active response to what's going on. What's interesting about this as compared to the global financial crisis or meltdown or whatever you want to call it back in 2008-9 is that this is so asymmetric that back then everybody was panicked, right? And the entire system was teetering on the edge. It didn't matter what business you were in, right? If you were in a hotel or you were in digital or you were in fiber optic or you were in AI, whatever, everybody was panicked and everybody was uncertain where the money was. This is entirely different, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an entirely different event. And so what we're seeing is, a whole bunch of companies that are actually thriving because of this event, right? And the obvious ones, the Zooms and the digital guys, we see all that. The delivery guys, the Instacarts, the e-commerce guys that are dealing with fast-moving consumer goods. Amazon is at an all-time high. Netflix is at an all-time high. I mean, all of these companies are actually doing phenomenally well on the one hand, and United Airlines and Boeing are like, oh my God, where is the bottom? Is there a bottom? Right? I mean, it's
Right.
and sort of everything in between. So we do see a number of portfolio companies who are actually thriving. We have a couple of companies in the logistics space, broadly defined, who, they're working 24/7 because there's such incredible demand to, urgent demand to get things moving through the economy while things are clogged up. So, enormous problems to solve and work to do in logistics and a whole bunch of the world over there. The guys that are doing enterprise software, it's interesting. I mean, they're, for the most part, at the enterprise level, we're going to see some carnage, but it's not a collapse. Their businesses are hunkered down. They're trying to manage through this somehow, but they still need their software. They still need their services. And so, it's going to be harder to sell new, your pipeline's going to slow down. Some people, your churn's going to go up, but it's not like you're shut down. And then there are the guys over at this end of the spectrum, and they are shut down. There's just like nothing going on, 90% down, right? I mean, how do you survive with a 90% collapse in your customer base? So everybody's different. And so that gives you different sort of levers to pull and processes to go through to try to survive. So there's some who are in the fortunate position that they have the flexibility to pivot, to adjust, to tweak, to move from making cars to making ventilators. I mean, we don't have a lot of companies in that category, but conceptually, we're seeing some shift in demand to meet new demands. Some companies have, very little flexibility to pivot. I mean, if you're in hospitality, I don't know, I'm sure there's a way to, Airbnb is trying to figure out something here, right?
Right. Yeah.
But so every company needs to go through some process of identifying where their core competencies are, and can those core competencies be retargeted towards something that is in demand right now in this period. And so we're going to go through this sort of, I don't know how it's going to feel, but it's going to be sort of multiple phases that we're going to go through, right? So we had the shutdown, wham, and during that shutdown, a vast amount of that were in warehouses have been moved into people's cupboards. I mean, so it's this bizarre logistic shift, right?
Yeah.
So that all the toilet paper that was, that was in warehouses in North Dakota or wherever they store toilet paper, right? All that toilet paper has moved into garages across America. You wouldn't believe how much toilet paper we have in our garage. I mean, it is like, are you freaking kidding me?
We had a run on toilet paper here. It's like, I just can't, it's like, go figure. We're heading into a global pandemic, and the first thing that comes to people's minds is toilet paper. And it was, it'd be interesting to see if somebody can figure out sort of what got that little thing going, right? Yeah.
I understand why, Clorox was out, right? I understand why there was a bleach issue, but a toilet paper? Well, so by the way, somebody explained this to me. I was asking why is there such a huge demand for toilet paper? It's not like whatever, and somebody explained to me it's because the reason is when somebody coughs, 10 people shit their pants.
Okay, okay, you've answered it.
Right.
That's
So,
right.
that's the run. Whatever.
That's
So
the reason. We have uncovered it here today. So,
no.
so I think, what you're talking about there is, how do you take those competencies and identify those things that you've got that you can leverage and you can pivot to? And again, I've seen some examples of people that have been very creative about that. But I also see there's a little bit of a trap, or I feel like there's a bit of a trap. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is that there are things here that I would say are temporal demand spikes. People are sort of betting on black, an example is people saying, oh, well, we're going to pivot because we've got a distillery and we're going to start making hand sanitizers. Now that's great for a distillery. But this is a temporal thing. Like, we don't want to be gearing all of our operations to that and throwing a whole lot of money and resources, financial and human, at it to find that all of a sudden in 6 months' time, nobody wants hand sanitizer anymore,
Yeah, no, I mean, and we had this conversation the other day where this company is, they've come up with this really clever, creative, interesting way to make a face mask that is cheap and gives you the ability to so that was, it's happy hour.
Oh.
It's happy hour. So that was my darling daughter who was
very good.
Taking good care of me.
So it's a bit early in the morning for that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Right. So, but back to, you can cut that part out. But some of no, we had this company has come up with, it's a very clever, interesting, it makes sense. I mean, high technology way to create an N100 mask. Wow, right? And that's cheaper than the current N95 mask. Whoa, that's amazing, right? But you're sitting there going, oh my God, right? I mean, there are probably 150 entities that are working on this that are backed by somebody's money, right? I mean, and there are probably another 1,000 inventors in the garage who are, coming up with something, a new mask. But, at some point, we're not going to need that many masks, right?
Right.
So I do not want to be in the business of funding masks. But there are some other things that are gonna be persistent long-term shifts. And I do think we're going to go to some next generation of supply chain optimization is going to happen. And I think what we're going to see, which we already sort of saw happening even before COVID, but we're going to see a restructuring of the global supply chain, because what we've realized now is that our supply chains are not as resilient as they need to be. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of work being done. And, guys like Accenture and McKinsey are going to make a ton of money. Like in the olden days, remember, what was it? It was business process reengineering or something. I don't know. But there were these fads in terms of reengineering. But there's going to be a legitimate restructuring of the global supply chain for us to get more redundancy and resiliency in our system in case of the next black swan event.
So is that partly due to the fact that we've sort of put all our eggs in the China basket at sort of cost of labor and efficiencies that we get from that? And do you see that perhaps people are going to be prepared to say, I'm going to pay a little bit more for this, and the cost, the price point's not going to be as important?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, there's going to be a cost that companies are going to be willing to incur. It's some variation on paying for insurance, right? To ensure that if there is some break in the supply chain, whether it's because of a natural disaster or because of a political disaster, that I'm not at risk because of a vulnerability in my supply chain. So, and this was something that, it started thanks to the Trump and Xi battle, right? So
Yeah.
Vietnam has been a huge beneficiary of Donald Trump, interestingly, right?
Right.
So, but I think this will accelerate that. And
Yeah.
everybody now is talking about, oops, we need to revisit our supply chain. There was, many years ago, when globalization was accelerating, the whole big idea was reduce the number of vendors. So, stop having so many scattered vendors, be more efficient. Focus your orders on a few vendors. You'll get better pricing, better quantities, closer, tighter relations. And so everybody reduced the number of vendors that they had around the world and concentrated. And now it looks like, we're going to have to go the other direction. We're going to have multiple sources, geographically distributed. We're going to see the I don't know how it's going to sort out, but certainly that's going to have an impact on global trade. And so there will be a tendency to want to bring your supply chain closer, so that you're not, dependent upon full, globalization.
Yeah.
But there will also be a tendency to have some redundancy. So instead of just depending on China, I'll have, a China source, and I'll have a Vietnam source, and maybe I'll have a Latin American source. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, in Australia, our manufacturing's been all but decimated. And I suppose there's some optimism from the Australian perspective is, we've had our eggs in one basket, and that is mining. If we don't dig stuff out of the ground and sell it to China, we got, $50 billion or something contributes to our economy. So, and we've got rich deposits of coal and iron ore, and that's basically, we're a big rock, coal and iron ore, right? And so,
plus you've got actors and actresses, right? So there's
well, most of them are from New Zealand, but we claim that they're ours.
Okay, I won't get into that, but
Russell Crowe's a New Zealander, right? You know that, don't you?
Yes. Speaking of natural resources,
that's right. But there is a bit of optimism here that maybe the advanced manufacturing, that we can start to look at bringing that back and get back to sort of a more diversified economy. Right. So there's opportunity in that, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I do think again, AI, Industry 4.0, additive manufacturing. There are a whole bunch of things that have been accelerating in the last few years. That, cross your fingers. I don't know. I mean, we're looking at an additive manufacturing company that can print 300 times faster than the current commercial systems. So if you can print 300 times faster, that changes the whole ballgame in terms of what you can print. You still can't do mass production, but you can do sort of intermediate scale production with those capabilities. And that's, lots and lots and lots of products are not mass produced. So that enables people to bring things closer to home. So, there are a lot of things going on that are going to restructure the global supply chain. And then the question is how the shift in services is going to, how that's going to go. And that, the biggest one that we've already experienced is retail. The shift from brick and mortar to e-commerce. Yeah. And so, what do we do with all these shopping malls, right?
Right. Like, what
do we do?
I was reading an article, I think, in New York Times the other day, and they were talking about, discretionary income, discretionary spending. The idea of buying a $400 pair of Ray-Bans from a mall, or an $800 or $1,000 or $5,000 Gucci handbag or whatever it is just dead, right?
Right. And so it's and again, another conversation. So we already were seeing the emptying of shopping malls. That was already a problem. This is gonna decimate malls, right?
Right.
I mean, because we're gonna have at least a year and a half of social distancing. And maybe not, but at least there's going to be a certain amount of social distancing, meaning that a whole bunch of people are not going to want to go to a mall, right?
Right.
So the answer is, we have the answer. The answer is we turn these shopping malls into job retraining sites and startup incubators, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
well,
I'm half kidding, but only half kidding, right? So we've got a whole bunch of real estate questions, right? How is real estate going to get reconfigured? I think eventually we'll be able to refill the stadiums, and so we'll get through that. And so I don't think the stadiums will go away. I think people have to have. There's just such a fundamental human enthusiasm for,
sports,
for those events, right? Between sports and concerts. So we'll see how that all.
So we've got one last question before we finish up. The travel, I know that you and I travel, and sometimes we seem to cross each other in the air. You're landing in
right.
KL, and I'm landing in Bangkok or something.
Somewhere over Christmas Island or something. I don't know. Whatever it is. Right? Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. I grew up on Christmas Island, by the way.
Oh my God, you're kidding! Really? Did you really? I did not know that. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, that's...
Yeah, I moved, my father was in phosphate mining at the time in the 70s. And,
wow. Really?
Yeah. And we left, I think we arrived at Christmas Island in 74 or 75. Wow. And then spent 5 or 6 years growing up there, from when I was about 10 or 9 years old to about 15 years old. No TV, no nothing. We just surfed and found old Japanese munitions forts in the jungle.
Wow, boy! Of all the Pacific Islands I could have picked to fly over, I picked Chris. I mean, there must be there must be something. I don't know.
There you go.
Across,
you picked that one. I thought maybe you must have seen me post something about it on my Facebook page or something. So there you go.
I just think there's a greater force in the world than we know. But
the question was travel. Obviously, with the startup events of World Cup startup, and with Beach City, we've done an enormous amount of traveling and covering large events, and of course our pipeline for events. We had a really strong pipeline of events. After sort of 2 or 3 years of really trying to build that media business, and then bang, she shuts down all over, within about 48 hours, we shut down our studio operations. All of our production gear is currently sitting in the corner of an office somewhere in Bangkok.
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was like a bit of a train wreck, like a cancellation on Monday, cancellation Tuesday, then it just gained momentum, and then everything, the event business just capitulated. Right. But that's okay. It is what it is. But I guess the question is, when do those events come back? Do they ever come back to the same way they were? The idea of people flying in from all over the world to Hong Kong to an event with 25, 30,000 people there, I just can't see that in the short term.
Well, not in the short term, but again, like my comment about pushing the kids back, and you've... anybody who can is gonna want to get on a plane and get a different perspective on the world. I mean, I know, as expensive and as sometimes exhausting as global travel is, it's extraordinarily energizing and valuable. I mean, to have the experience of bouncing around the world and meeting people from all other parts of the world and interacting and connecting. I mean, you know, you just can't network the same way in this context as if you go to an event. And that's, you know, again, as you know, right, the main reason most people go to an event is not because the content of the event is the only way you could possibly get the content. It's because of all the other people at the event that you want to meet, connect with, talk with, and you know, and build a relationship with. And you just can't do that, you know, in this Zoom type of environment. So there's no question, both for the emotional reason that you want to sort of move around the world, and as well as for the business practical ROI reason, you know, we're going to see this. We're going to see it come back. It absolutely is going to come back. And it's, you know, people are certainly, all this, you know, the riots in Michigan are all about, I want to have groups again, right? I do not want to be separated. Right? I mean,
but I mean, do we really need semi-automatics to make that point?
Well, I guess, you know, it gets the cameras out, I suppose. I don't know. That's
So
yeah, it's certainly going to happen. I just wonder how, you know, just how bad this recession is going to be, and how what impact that has on our ability to stage these events and get attendance at these events. I think, the great news, we'll see if it's true. The great news is that jet fuel is like 50 cents a gallon now. I mean, right? So, you know, I mean, so it is, I don't know. It's quite possible that the global oil glut will enable us to fly around the world for half the price of, you know, of what we were paying before. So, and still make a margin for the airlines. I mean, I don't know. It'll be, I wonder how because my understanding is that the fuel is a huge percentage of the cost of a flight. So once you got the plane, you know, then your costs, you know, you have labor costs and maintenance costs and fuel costs. I don't know how the economics are exactly.
But it's a large cost.
You know, I mean, the airlines are all going to be trying to get our business back. And so I think we'll see, and the hotels are all going to be trying to get our business back. And so I do think we will see this extraordinary deflation in a bunch of sectors of our economy. You know, almost certainly housing prices are going to go down. I mean, it's predictable we're going to see a lot of deflation across the economy at the same time that we're printing trillions of dollars of new money, you know, out of thin air. So, you know, I got to get some monetary policy economists to explain how this is all going to sort out. But we'll see. But yeah, don't worry. We will be together again someday.
We will, and in the interim, I've put my attention on trying to help drive the technologies in the fight against and the prediction and management of fires, because we're about to head into another catastrophic fire season.
You didn't tell me what this fire tech thing is.
So the fire tech initiative is, I've been working with a digital hub out of Peregian Beach on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. The director of the hub there seconded me into this project. We've now got support from the local Noosa Shire, the Queensland State Government, and the Australian Federal Government. And the project is all about how do we drive adoption of fire technologies, satellites, AI, robotics, all sorts of amazing technologies. And I've been seconded as the program director to drive that. So two sides of it is how do we build capability in commercial capability in the tech side, and then how do we drive adoption and reduce friction in the market so that we can get some of these technologies adopted?
There's a pivot for you. I mean, somebody's got to solve this problem, and it's a highly valuable problem to solve. And if you can be in the middle of, that's a great story of an extraordinary pivot. So yeah, I mean it'll be interesting. I mean, which it's back to the role of government. That's the sort of thing the government has got to coordinate and largely fund. We're going to have, across the capitalistic world, we're going to have this massive shift in the relationship of government to business. And both just in terms of sort of where the money comes from and how the money is used. But, I'll leave you with this conundrum that I am not sure how to resolve, which is that in this, because of the nature of this crisis, it's very different than the meltdown, which prompted this, sort of attack on Wall Street and the 99% and the, protests against the bankers, because back, in 2008, 2009, we could point to the bankers and say, it's your fault. You guys are bad guys. In this environment, it's not, yes, you can blame certain people for not handling it well, but it's not, I can't even say it out loud, but it's not really Trump's fault, but, but it's not really Trump's fault. But, so there's a different social reaction to this crisis than there was in 2008, 2009. And the question is it going to fundamentally change our attitude toward capitalism? And is it, right now, sort of all over the world, we're seeing this sense that if you are in a position to help, if you're in a position to give, you want to help, you want to give, you want, you feel a sense of obligation to the rest of society to be giving if you have the resources to give. And the phrase that comes to mind as we go through this is, from each according to his ability and to each according to his need. And it makes my brain explode to think, do you know where that comes from? Do you know where that quote comes from?
No.
It's Karl Marx.
Right.
It's Karl Marx. It's in the Communist Manifesto, right?
Wow.
It's the Communist Manifesto.
Wow.
So, to some extent, it's a large extent, it's an extension of a sense of charity and philanthropy and social contract. But, you extend it a little further and you cross over into an entirely different social system.
Right.
And we already have a generation of young people who, sort of came of age during the meltdown and now are experiencing this, who are saying, wait a second, that sort of individualistic, every man for himself ethic that sort of capitalism sort of highlights or celebrates, the Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, whatever. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't resonate in this kind of circumstance.
Yeah.
And and this from each and to each resonates a lot more. And so it'll be interesting to see how our political systems respond. Is everybody going to move? I think the left will move more left. I think the right, I don't know. I don't know what the right will do. What will the right do? Will the right move more toward the center or not? So that's whatever. But Lee, it was just a pleasure, spending time catching up.
Thanks, Bill. We could sit here and talk forever. Maybe we need to do another session. I've created a little, white labeled LinkedIn using Mighty Networks, which is our Fire Tech Connect network. I'm going to invite you into it. I want to see you in there, so make sure you join and support.
All right.
We've got some cool companies that are doing drones and robotics and all sorts of stuff in there. So when we're going to build that network out, and while we're worried about this virus, we're going to try and focus on how do we solve this fire problem. So, Bill, thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
It's great to see you. Take care. Be good. Stay healthy. Stay sane. Okay?
You too. Same to you. Thanks, man.
Okay. Bye-bye.